which have to do with the United States. They're passing neutrality acts, right? And what are the neutrality acts doing?
Can't supply any belligerents with weapons.
You can't supply belligerents with weapons, because, it's a bad thing. And even though we're talking about this, the same allies that we fought with are fighting the same enemy we fought with, you can't supply them with weapons. And we like Britain. We're friends with Britain. But we're not going to supply them with weapons. And then they push it even further. And Germany's not getting any weapons from the United States, but Britain is, but we're not going to supply it anymore. What else do we pass? I mean, that's the first Neutrality Act. And you say, well, no, you don't want to sell guns to people who are shooting at one another. But even that's not good enough.
No supply.
You can't say no supply. We're not going to supply anything. Which means we're not going to send food to Britain. We're not going to send medicines to Britain. At the time, Britain is being bombed. This is the Blitz. And can't send food, can't send money. Because we do not want to be involved. We don't want to be involved. We don't want to get sucked in to this war. Okay? So we've got all of this, a strong isolationism in the 1930s. Okay, again, what kicks us back into intervention? Pearl Harbor. And Roosevelt kind of wants to. He was Secretary of Navy under Wilson, so he knows some mistakes. Wilson, or he feels he knows mistakes. Wilson. And one of the mistakes that Wilson made is the United States wasn't prepared for World War I. When the war started, the United States had, 114,000 people in the Army. Jeez Louise, you didn't fight a war like that. And they didn't start mobilizing until war had been declared. Roosevelt said, we're not going to get caught with our pants down. We're going to do things now. And so he mobilizes earlier, builds up the army earlier, right? Meets with Churchill, because if we get involved, that's the side we're going to get involved in. Even coming out kind of with a strategy. If we get involved, we're going to defeat Germany first, because Germany is the great threat to world peace. And that was almost screwed up by Pearl Harbor. Because what does Pearl Harbor do? It changes everything, because now no longer can Germany be the United States' first target. Because the American people are not going to be satisfied with saying, oh yeah, Japan attacked us, but we're going to put most of our money and effort to defeat Germany. The American people are going to say, no. Teach Japan a lesson first, and then worry about Germany. Germany takes the weight off the American shoulders, kind of gives Roosevelt. Hitler couldn't have given Roosevelt a better president, because Hitler does what? Something he never did, but he did with the United States. Adolf Hitler declares war on the United States. And now Germany and Japan and Mussolini says, okay. And he declares war too. Now they all become one bloc. And now Roosevelt can do. The United States and the Allies can coordinate a strategy that does defeat Germany first. Okay. So we've done all that. The war is fight the war. Oh, by the way, who wins? Oh yeah, last time I heard that we won. Although, if anybody's watched The Man in the High Tower on Netflix, envisions a world where Germany and Japan win, because Germany gets atomic weapons first.
That ought to be a scary movie.
What's that?
That ought to be a scary movie.
Everything changes. Well, the eastern half of the United States is part of the German Reich, and the western half is part of Imperial Japan. And so you have German soldiers, and it's later. The war is what, 1970s. But so the war's been over for 30 years, but the Germans are.
I'll bet you that worked real good, because you're always talking about the fact that you don't want to have colonies.
Yeah.
Because you got, it's too much trouble to control.
It is, it's an interesting, what, they drop a bomb on New York or something.
Yeah, like Statue of Liberty. They do a bunch of show things.
Yeah, so it's an interesting, and then it gets kind of science fiction because alternative reality.
But actually, they do run into the problem of the cost of running the colonies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they can't control the population as a whole.
And you know, you have inherent tension between the Germans and the Japanese because the Germans still have the weapons, you know, and they are the senior partner in this. So it's an interesting thing. But anyway, Man in the High Tower on Netflix. Anyway, last season. So
I like the Amazon.
what's that?
It's on Amazon.
Is it on Amazon? Amazon. Okay. I know I had to be on one of them because those are the two I've got.
Amazon.
You know. Okay. So anyway, we leave the war. We win. Woo! We win. As we come out of this war, because this is a terrible war, we've got two sides, right? Who are the big? And King they call it, well, one is a big winner. The other one, I don't know whether you can say is a big winner. But who leaves the war stronger than they entered?
Russia.
Soviet Union, boom, on one side, and who's the other country that's strong? Yeah, the United States. You know, it's
We're like the
always
world power
yes,
now.
that's right. You end up with two world powers, and the United States primarily because we've produced a huge amount of war equipment, you know, and we mobilized a whole country in fighting this war. But maybe the biggest advantage we had is
We had lots of money there.
yeah, we had lots of money. What made that possible is nobody was fighting in Toledo. You know, we didn't have any, nobody,
We didn't
yeah.
fight a domestic.
That's
war.
right, nobody bombed Santa Barbara. You know, and we were relatively, well, not relatively, outside of two islands in Alaska, you know, and American possessions around. We were really, really protected in this war. And some Japanese
By
balloon bombs.
By two big oceans.
Yeah. So I mean, it was the United States was unscathed in terms of its industry and such here. Soviet Union comes out stronger. But Lord have mercy. Soviet Union comes stronger because
Took over a lot of countries.
they took over a lot of countries and mobilized a lot of people. And
They couldn't be anything but stronger.
oh,
They were so
geez.
bad.
But the Germans were killing Russians all over the place. You know, when you look at Russian casualties, the Russian casualties were, you know, double German casualties. You know, double Axis casualties. Lord have mercy, that's a lot of Russians died, you know, in this war. You know, millions of Russians died. You know, but they keep coming. They kept coming. So you end up now, that becomes really important. You want to file that away. Because this experience of Russia in the First World War was fairly negative, right? We had Russian Revolution because Russian soldiers were dying. You know, Second World War, even more dramatic. Invasion of Russia over those flat Polish plains, right into Russia. You know, millions of Russians are dying. Now, if you are a Russian, even Russian leadership, and this has happened to you twice in 25 years, and this was a big one, what might be going through your head? What might be some things you would really, really want if you are Russian leadership and have gone through a Soviet leadership and have gone through this horrendous war?
You want to make sure that Germany never rises again.
One, you sure as heck don't want Germany rising again, because the Germans did it to you twice. You know, so one of the things you do, you want to make sure there are no Germans hanging around the Ukraine like there have been for, you know, 500 years. So you'll ship them out. You know, so you don't want to worry about Germans. What else are you going to say?
You're going to build countries around the perimeter.
Yeah, you are. Does anybody have a greater right to be paranoid than the Soviets? Lord have mercy. You know, so you are going to want to build a wall around your country. So what? That's right. You can't get in and you can't get out. Particularly, you can't get in. You know, before you can get to Russia. Okay, what else are you going to do? If you're so concerned, you're going to build a wall. you know, around your country. You're going to make sure Germany stays sort of in its place. What else you going to do?
You're gonna occupy the countries in Eastern Europe as a buffer state.
You better believe it. You better have a buffer state. Now, all of that is good, but what else are you going to need? So this doesn't happen again.
Big army.
You got to have a big army. You know, you got to maintain a huge army. Because if you don't have a big army, none of this matters. Right? So you're going to have to maintain a pretty big army. Now, as the United States is looking, as the other great power, is looking at what the Russians are doing. And it gets more complicated because Soviet socialism is a international socialism. You know, they are looking to expand because they're looking to encourage Marxist socialism, looking to encourage revolutions elsewhere. You know, because this is an economic philosophy that other places, it's a revolutionary idea. Other kinds of socialism, like National Socialism, is going to be focused on nation. So the Russians, you know, they proclaim this international business, which makes you nervous because they're trying to get revolutions all around. As the United States, as the other great power, and its allies, they start looking at what Russia's doing.
We build NATO.
And you gotta respond, right? Because Russia looks, if I'm looking at the Russian army going up, right? And I'm looking at them having these satellite countries protected. That sure looks like expansionism to me. You know, these really protected countries, big army, all these little buffer states surrounding me, that wall to prevent people from coming in. That sure looks to me like a threat, right? And especially since they're espousing international revolution, which is what Marx did, we got some real tension between these two great powers who were, became atomic quickly, both of them, the United States first, and were allies during the war. Now that creates its own problem because, you know, we went from the Soviets are great. Oh yeah, boy, we're fighting with our Russian brothers. Ooh, posters. Oh, that's wonderful. You know, and after the weekend, it was we got to be watching those guys. They are great.
Yeah, they're
And maybe we shouldn't. Maybe Germany wasn't our real enemy in the war. You know, and it was like a weekend. You know, so and that's what you end up with, like in Hollywood, the blacklist. You got movie producers that had been producing movies during the war. Yeah, the Soviets, what they're doing in Russia's great. Oh, we're all in favor of it. American people need to support our Soviet brothers. And you know, war's over. Okay, now you got to start making movies showing how bad communism is.
Yeah.
You know, and you got this, you know, so we got a backlash there. Okay, so we leave the war, and that's what we end up with. And so as we look at foreign relations, as we move into this international peace, you know, again, Roosevelt's going to be instrumental in this kind of stuff. You know, is very aware of mistakes that his former boss made during and after World War. And one of the mistakes is League of Nations. You know, the way Wilson approached the League. And so Roosevelt's going to approach something that is like the League, but going to do it in a radical way. They're going to organize what's called, what? Okay, the United Nations. Now understand, this is really kind of cool. During World War II, the League of Nations is still needed. There is still a League of Nations in Geneva. Whoa, they're not going to disband until 1944. You know, so you still got a League of Nations, which is kind of interesting. And Roosevelt, though, is organizing in 1942 a United Nations. You know, kind of a rival, sort of like the NFL, AFL. You know, but the League of Nations got stuck with Kansas City. You know, instead of all that. But you know, you got these two organizations. But Roosevelt's going to make sure that his United Nations is not going to be like Roosevelt's League of Nations. And what would be some things that he would want to do to make sure that the United Nations doesn't go down the same road as the League? What would be some mistakes that he might perceive occurred with the league that he doesn't want happen?
Security Council.
Okay, good. You know, one of the big problems with the League of Nations is, you know,
I know, no.
they had no power. And they had no power to do anything. Wilson assumed, this is an assumption, that the war had been so bad that no reasonable national leader would want war again. Nobody would. Nobody. And so if you gave countries the opportunity to talk about it, you know, then nobody wants to fight a war. If you talk about it, you can work out your differences. It's like you're married, you know, it's something, nobody wants divorce. Nobody wants to get divorced, right? So go to a marriage council. Both sides want to work it out. You'll work it out, right? And that was kind of, that was, now, you probably don't want to laugh quite that loud. Yeah, but that was the assumption. All you had to do was you had to talk it out. And they found out that some people want a divorce. You know, when you go into the marriage counselor, well, Sandy, you say, yeah. Okay.
As long as she pays for it.
As long as she pays for it.
There you go.
All right, yeah, but you go in, you know, when you go to a marriage counselor, sometimes the guy or the woman want a divorce. They just do. You know, and the marriage counselor, no matter how much you talk about it, it ain't gonna work. And that's what ended up happening in the league. You know, when Italy really wants Ethiopia, it doesn't matter that the league says, no, I think you should rethink it. You know, I think you should. You know, you've got a pretty good-looking woman at home. You know, you shouldn't be running after those Ethiopians. You know, and you know, Mussolini says, you know, and we move on.
He wants to be like Rome.
Yeah, he wants to be like Rome. And you know, everybody knows the Caesars were the man. Anyway, so we got to give power. And so the United Nations is going to have power to intervene. Going to have a security council. You know, when you were dumping people into the League of Nations, every country had one representative. And so when an issue came up, it was discussed by all the members. All the members. Britain, France, Luxembourg, all the great powers. Yeah. You know, had an equal voice. You know, and you know, so the little guys, you know, France was giving lots of themselves. You know, they don't care. You know, Luxembourg real well. France is real good. And so that became a real problem. You know, Ethiopia has a voice. People don't care what Ethiopia says. You know, you got a problem in it. So we have a security council. And what we're going to do with the Security Council is we're going to make sure the major powers always have almost a defining vote. And those major powers are going to be United States,
Soviet Union,
Great Britain, France,
China.
and China. Those are going to be the five powers because they're kind of the leading allies in the war with Germany and Japan. They are always going to have the defining voices in the Security Council. So we're going to give our League of Nations a little bit of voice. Now, we're in a world where there are 50 nations, other than the ones that are defeated. One of the deals is you got to declare war on Germany and Japan to join. That's how you get your membership card in the league. You know, declaring war. And so in late 1944, 1945, man, you got countries declaring war right and left. I mean, you got everybody declaring war on Germany and Japan. You know.
The Russians declared war on Japan.
Oh yeah.
Just before the end.
Oh, right before the end. But I mean, you've got El Salvador declaring war, entering the war as an ally. You know, you got the Dominican Republic declaring war. You got everybody declaring war. Now, anybody fighting, any Dominican troops fighting anywhere? No. But they got to declare war because if you don't declare war, you can't join the United Nations. So everybody declares war on Germany. Geez Louise, some German allies. Bulgaria declares war. Romania declares war. You know, eventually even Hungary, when they have a new government, declares war. You know, even their allies declare war. Italy declares war on Germany. Everybody's doing it because if you don't get to join the league. Or the new league, United Nations. Okay, so we end up with 51 countries forming this in April of 1945, meeting in the city of
San
San Francisco to form the league, and that's where they vote they're going to make the permanent headquarters instead of Geneva. And Geneva is sort of the center of international stuff, peace, and that kind of jazz. You know, clocks, chocolate, cheese. But instead of putting it in Geneva, they're going to put it in the United States, which really shows of the great powers who is even recognized by the other great powers as the greatest power, the United States. You're putting it in the most powerful country in the biggest city in the United States. Okay, so we got League of Nations. The United States is not going to retreat within itself. World War II probably doesn't, we got a lot of historians working on this now, coming up with new ideas. Whether the atomic bombs that we dropped, or what were the two cities we dropped?
Hiroshima and
Nagasaki. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Okay, big, little man and big boy, we dropped on the city. That was, for a long time, that was assumed that caused the Japanese to surrender. Certainly that was involved. One of the other factors that pushed Japan to surrender was
They were losing the war.
and Russia enters the war and just steamrolls the largest Japanese force remaining in Manchuria. Just steamrolls it. And the Japanese are doing in Manchuria something they've never done before, in mass. Man, that's surrendering in mass.
Yeah, the Japs usually didn't do that.
They didn't do it. As the Russians just are steamrolling over this vaulted Japanese army, like it wasn't even there. And the Japanese leadership not only see this nuclear explosion, but if the Russians end up pushing through, and they have pushed through these Japanese possessions, and there's an invasion of Japan, and the Russians are involved, what is that going to mean to Japan? Yeah, they would be petitioned, just like Germany. So Russia's going to be able to occupy an island, and we're going to have a whole different future to Japan. So the Japanese are really leery about the Russians invading, and the Russians would have. My gosh, the Russians would have, and the United States would have been excited about the Russians helping. What's that?
Not really.
Well, they would have been excited while the Japanese were fighting. After it was over, they wouldn't be excited at all.
Just like we weren't excited about Germany.
Yeah, that's exactly right. All right, so we got this bomb. That's called special effects.
Thank you.
Okay, the biggest project. Who has the technology? United States does, right? We got the technology for the most destructive weapon ever created with human hands, right? Teenagers come close, but the bomb is the most destructive, right? Now, what are we going to do with the bomb? What are we going to do with this technology?
We're going to tell the world that we're to be feared.
Okay, that's one group. It's saying,
We have the power.
yeah, we're allies, but like they say in
the
Animal
Farm,
Farm, all animals are equal. Just some animals are more equal than others. We're all allies. Just some allies are more allies than others. And who's the big guy?
We are.
Us.
We are.
We are, and we got it.
We got it.
We got it, and we know how to use it.
And we
So you better what? Let's
watch
go.
out.
All right, there are people that are saying that's exactly the way we should use it. Now, when you take that stance, other countries say, oh, thank you. We're so glad that you have it and we trust you so much to use it for all our benefit. Is that what they're gonna say?
No.
No, they're not gonna say.
Way.
What are they gonna say?
You gotta have it too.
Yeah, they're gonna say, we gotta
They
get
wanted
this
it
too. You know, we don't like them much, we gotta get it too. And, you know, there are people, this wasn't like an alien came down and taught them this technology. You know, people developed it. If one people can develop it, somebody else can, especially if they got spies, you know, writing down stuff, you know. So, you know, if one's gonna do it, others gonna, it's only a matter of time before it spreads, right? You know, so the thought that, oh, you know, we'll keep it for ourselves and use it, you know, to, you know, kind of cower, was part of the strategy that some endorsed in the government. Truman was really big on holding the technology. You know, and Byrne, the Secretary of State, we need to hold the technology and use it to build a better world. But other people have a different perspective. That instead of us holding it, maybe we should.
Use it.
Well, use it, but use it in how
As a
so?
deterrent.
Well, they're not even saying we're going to use it as a deterrent. Maybe we should.
We're not gonna use it if you don't wanna use it.
Well, there are some that are saying maybe we should share it.
Really?
Oh, so if everybody has the bad stuff, then everybody will say,
Or
well,
maybe-
we're gonna use it.
Maybe we
They
should
ask each other.
entrust the technology to the United Nations.
Oh.
And we're going to entrust this technology to the United Nations. And we're going to give the technology to our allies. We're going to give it to the French, and we're going to give it to the British, and we're going to give it to the Soviets. And then nobody needs to feel threatened and left out and threatened by this technology. So nobody has the incentive to do whatever is necessary to get it. You know, and we're not tempted to use it. You know, if we know other people have it. So that's kind of a deterrent thing. You know, so we're not going to be, you know, frivolous in using this technology if we know that Britain has it, France has it, the Soviets have it. And so there were people that wanted to share the technology, and let's entrust it with the United Nations so that it could be used in a beneficial way, you know, rather than a destructive way. And there were people who were important in the administration, in the Democratic administration, like Henry Wallace, you know, who believed that's exactly what he believed, that they should, and Oppenheimer, you know, believed that the technology should be shared, you know. So we're in this tension. Roosevelt tended, you know, his perspective on the technology was far more open to sharing because he was far more trusting of Uncle Joe and the Soviets than Truman would later. You know, Roosevelt had really believed, because he was good at it, he believed he could charm just about anybody, that he was a good enough politician that he could.
We heard that lately too.
What's that?
We heard that same.
That's right. That he could kind of, you know, control situations by his. So Roosevelt was far more open. He would have, if he had lived, there's far more chance that that technology would have been shared, or that there had been a major disagreement in the administration. Truman was not part of that circle. So Truman didn't share that. Byrne, Secretary of State, didn't share that. Simonson didn't believe that.
Supposedly Truman didn't even know about the
That's the way
atomic bomb until
Right.
until after Roosevelt died.
Until he had to, you know, decide to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we've got, and part of this, we're not going to share this technology with the other allies, because frankly, even Britain and France are saying we were on the same side. Geez, we were on the same side. Why are you not sharing this technology with us? You know, if we have it too, our world is a safer place. You know, if it's in the Security Council, doesn't that make the world safer than if one country has it, you know, and can be used by that country any way it wants? You know, so our allies are not pleased. You know, certainly the Soviets are. And as soon as the war's over, we get this shift in perspective. And that's what I was saying before. You know, moving from the Soviets are our loyal allies, and we will do anything to help the Soviets on the Western Front.
Then Churchill made a speech about the Iron Curtain.
In Fulton, Missouri, that an Iron Curtain is descended on Europe.
I have a little story on that.
Okay.
I worked for a company called A.P. Green in Mexico, Missouri, when I was in college. And they made refractories aligned steelmaking furnaces, so they obviously did a lot of business in this area. But when the Greens were no longer part of the company bought their estate, and they used it as a place where people could stay. And I came there for a job interview. In the library was a small picture on top of the fireplace that was taken in front of that fireplace. In the middle was Mr. Green, and one side was Harry Truman, the other side was Winston Churchill.
Whoa.
And he visited there before giving his speech at Westminster College.
Whoa. That's really cool.
That's a keeper.
Well, you don't understand. As soon as the war's over, Winston Churchill isn't in control of Britain. In fact, Winston Churchill is not Prime Minister of Britain
Until the 50s.
again until the 50s. You know, when the British are still fighting the Japanese, and Winston Churchill, they have an election, Winston Churchill is no longer Prime Minister of Great Britain. It becomes the Labour, Attlee, who is a Labour, represents a Labour Party, not the Conservative or kind of a Union Party that Churchill did. And Attlee is a socialist, because that's what Labour was. And so he is far more open to, trusting the Soviets than Churchill. So, we've got a whole different dynamic going on after the war. Well, anyway, but we, as the United States, when we talk about the United States, we're going to take a perspective that now the world is, we've defeated the Germans, we've defeated the Japanese, fascism is no longer a problem, but the day fascism ceases to be a problem, what's the problem?
Communism.
Communism. And I almost said Soviet communism, but it's not going to be. That would have been wrong. Because we're going to make an assumption that all communists are all the same. All of them are the same. All you have to be is red. If you're red, you're all the same. Belong to the same book club. Okay? And that's the Communist Manifesto.
Take a break.
Or do whatever you want. Feel free to do whatever you want.
I'm gonna eat my muffin.
Like in the Army, we give a break, and they spoke a little